Hello, my name is Andy Burroughs, Director of Business Development at Tamar Science Park. We hosted a seminar on international trade recently. We're making the content available to you as there is benefit to all companies who are selling internationally or just thinking about it. We had speakers from PricewaterhouseCoopers, HSBC, Foot Anstey and two local companies, Frugi and the Grow Group. They were talking about their experiences of selling internationally. Specifically, the seminar addressed: what do you need to consider if you're selling internationally or considering doing so? What are the risks and how can you mitigate against them? What is the best way to access international markets cost effectively? How do you expand your business overseas with regard to your intellectual property, managing tax issues and people? What are some of the banking and funding options available? Andy Lewis from HSBC showed how international trade is forecast to grow in the UK over the next couple of years, with sales to Asia continuing to grow most strongly. International trade is the passport to growth, and 88% of businesses who trade internationally see it as pivotal to their success. Andy outlined some of the key considerations for international traders, including taking time to complete the right research, ensuring the supply chain is robust enough, understanding risks and how to mitigate them, knowing the cash flow situation, and improving your margins and knowing your negotiation points.
International trade has both opportunities and risks associated with it, but it plays a key part and will play an increasingly important role in the wider UK economy. There's very little to stop business from accessing these opportunities in reality, but you need to be aware of the risks and mitigate them, which is what today has been about.
Kate Cully from PwC explained how trading overseas usually leads to a local tax liability and some of the complexities around this. She went on to talk about how to structure an investment overseas.
The first thing to look at when investigating the company's tax position overseas is to see whether the UK has a tax treaty with the relevant overseas country. This supersedes UK and local tax law on when you're taxable, and this tax treaty should contain a list explaining exactly what activities make you taxable in the other country and which don't. The UK has a good tax treaty network with more than 100 countries covered, including all of the biggies like the EU, Russia, China and the States.
Using UK-based employees to travel overseas to promote growth is often seen as the best way to promote a business. Alex Price from PwC gave some great tips on what needs to be considered to manage the risk. The need to plan ahead, cover all angles, consider costs, understand how you will measure success and whether there is a stop-go point. Make sure you know what you're getting yourself into.
The key is to find out what you need. I have experience in this region of small companies sending people to Russia where 2 employees were turned away at the border because they didn't have the right paperwork. I've also got experience of people being in Singapore only for 4 weeks, being refused to leave Singapore until they'd actually paid some taxes there. So it can hit you both ways. You might have troubles getting into a country. Conversely, you might have trouble getting out of a country. So the key there is obviously plan ahead, look into the immigration rules of the country you're going to and make sure you've got the right paperwork. The last thing you want is that sort of issue impacting you when you're trying to grow your business overseas.
Owen Byrne from PwC gave a great talk on overseas sales taxes and VAT for goods and services. The need to understand whether you're selling goods to businesses or consumers. When services are supplied, the key question is where the supply is deemed to have taken place, with again a difference between selling to businesses and consumers. Owen then went on to talk about reporting requirements. Don't overlook this or it could cost you a lot of money and aggravation.
If you make supplies to businesses that are registered in the EU, then that has to be recorded on what we call an EC sales list. The reason for doing that is not just statistics. It is, if I'm saying there's a business that's given me their VAT number and I validated it, so I'm not charging any VAT in the UK, that VAT is due somewhere. So the business in France or Spain who's going to account for that appears on my EC sales list, which then goes to the tax authorities in France. They look down the list and say, hang on, he's not accounting for any VAT, let's go and visit him. And the same applies if you're buying in services. You'll appear on someone's list and HMRC will say, hang on, the amount of VAT that they're accounting for is a bit low. You're on my list, I'm going to come out and visit you under the auspices of a 3-year audit. And then they say, oh, can I see all of your invoices, please. And then, again, you're stuck. So it's worth knowing that the other side, you've got to account for things on reverse charge.
Marlena Howes of Foot Anstey gave an introduction to some of the different types of intellectual property rights, including trademarks, design rights, patents, copyright, database rights, national rights, and so on, and looked at cost-effective ways of accessing international markets. These were all illustrated by our case studies from Frugi and the Grow Group. You need to consider whether you're looking for exclusive, non-exclusive, or sole arrangements with overseas partners, and consider different restrictions or limitations that apply depending on the product or service, duration, geography, and so on. Before contracts are entered into, it's important that a number of factors are considered, including the market you're trying to enter, due diligence, non-disclosure agreements, competition law, and identifying IP issues, including domain names. Marlena went on to highlight some of the pros and cons of the different types of agreement and concluded with some practical tips. Know your IP rights and protect and enforce them. Consider what model suits you best. Carry out due diligence on the party you enter into an agreement with. Enter into non-disclosure agreements and be clear about obligations and the rights of each party.
Because as I mentioned, intellectual property rights are national rights, and therefore you do need to think about, have you actually got the rights protected in those jurisdictions? Have you got something to license or not? So geographically, you might say, well, I want to go into the States next year. So do you need to think about protecting your trademarks or your design rights in the States, if you haven't already done so, before you actually go into the market?
We heard from two local companies who talked about how they'd been successful selling overseas. Frugi, based in Cornwall, who make organic clothing for children, and the Grow Company, based in Ashburton in Devon. Lucy Jewson is co-founder of Frugi. They started in 2004, employ 27 people, and looking at sales of £3.5 million this year, and 40% growth going forwards. Export accounts for 40 to 45% of their business. The UKTI had been very useful to Frugi over the years, including their Passport to Export and Gateway to Growth programs. They have now built an online real-time stock availability website for their trade customers, wherever they might be. This group accounts for 65% of their sales. They have terms and conditions and key information in key languages and are now publishing euro and dollar price lists. They have invested in a multilingual overseas sales team. They segment their customers and invest heavily in great brand materials. They are active listeners and feed that into their product design and have a secret Facebook page for retailers. Frugi's primary route to market is selling direct to independents abroad, especially in Eurozone countries where there are few barriers to buying. This gives them a higher margin business with more control. They use competitor stockist lists and have 247 stockists in Europe, with Germany, France and Italy the most important. Lucy talked about their experience of using distributors. Now they only do this in Russia, and they're trialling a new innovative approach in America, where they are working with a great logistics house to offer retailers a door-to-door service with a no-hassle dollar price. Just give it a go, was Lucy's final comment. The Grow Company are the manufacturers of the Grow Bag, a baby sleeping bag which accounts for 58% of their business. They operate in the safe sleep for babies sector and were established in the year 2000. Rob Pascoe from Grow explained how they sell to 400 independents in the UK and some big high street names. They employ 36 staff and distribute to 26 countries. 30% of their turnover is export, and they're looking to grow this to 50% by 2017 to 18. They have identified new markets and are looking to expand existing markets, including the 700 million people on our doorstep in Europe. Distributors are their key route to market, and their industry trade fair is key to finding partners. From each new distributor, they require a business plan and understand the other product groups they work with and their routes to market. Good relationships underpinned by a strong contract are very important. Rob also talked about the pros and cons of using agents and how they were exploring selling direct in some markets. Joint ventures were used originally by the Grow Company, but they found them hard to administer and very expensive. He went on to talk about potential issues when selling overseas, including product design, sizing, understanding consumer needs and lifestyle, and having realistic expectations, as well as potential issues with brand and domain registration and patent infringements. In conclusion, know the market, find the right partner, have the right product for the market, manage expectations and timelines, and if it doesn't work, have a way out. I hope you found this summary useful. I would like to thank all of our speakers and wish you well in developing your business overseas. Please look out for details of other exciting events and developments at Tamar Science Park soon.